Welcome back to Going to Production. I'm David Dieroff, and I'm joined by Wael Rabadi. In our first two episodes, we talked about platform multiplication and Conway's Law, how smart teams end up building fragmented systems because of organizational dynamics and human behavior. Now, if you're a technical leader listening to this, you're probably thinking, okay, I get it, problems, but what's the actual solution? Today, we're going to get practical. We're going to explore ideas that can work together to address the chaos that we've been discussing. But I want to be clear and upfront. This isn't a magic bullet. We're going to be brutally honest about what this combination can solve and absolutely what it cannot solve. Because if your organization has fundamental dysfunction, no amount of good tooling is going to save you. What these approaches can do is give you a structured way to think about platform consolidation and methodology for making informed decisions, and proven tools that handle complex orchestration so your teams don't have to build all this themselves. So Wael, we're going to start in a sensitive spot, and let's just start off swinging here. How are we going to break down these monarchies?
Really good question. So let's think about what we're trying to do when we say we break down the monarchies. One point that we raised in the last episode was monarchies can be established in a way that's beneficial to the organization. So what that means is that if the organization is divided on its goals, initiatives, business objectives, then your monarchies will be divided. The thing that you want to identify and avoid, if you have multiple monarchies inside of your organization, which then by definition, we're using this analogy, there's probably internal fighting.
Yeah.
So how do we break that down? Now we need to go back up a little bit. How do we create a single monarchy? So monarchies are not bad. We could say they're bad in a government perspective. Yeah, that's one conversation. But really monarchies, in one perspective, are not necessarily bad. When you think about it from a perspective, if everybody within the monarchy are operating together in support of a healthy environment,
right,
in support of meeting the objective, meeting the business goals, meeting the user experience and the value that we add to the user. Now this market can come together and work together in order for them to fulfill the business goals.
That's just basically a healthy company then.
Exactly. We're using that term, but technically what we're trying to get to is that what does a healthy company look like?
Yeah.
If everybody within the company is tracking in the same direction and the vision is clear, the direction is clear, the plan around execution is clear.
Going in the same direction, right? A lot of what we've talked about, especially I think with the human side of it is, one, everyone going in the same direction, but then two, a lot of people getting locked into here's where we are, we're not moving, right? This is we're maintaining here. We both know that is not going to end well in the long term, right?
Right.
You've got to, I don't know if we could say embrace change, but change is coming, right? It is inevitable.
Yes. So change can be embraced or it can be destructive. Right? How you manage change is a fundamental thing. Like we talk about it through psychology courses and we talk about it through good leadership conversations. And there's a lot of books around how do you manage change. But I think when we look at methodologies and bringing methodologies back together, there's probably a combination of things you need to combine before you say, now we're ready for change.
Right.
So we talked about a little bit when you go into vague scenarios. And I love vague scenarios. So like I always tell people, like, throw me in a vague scenario. I'll figure out how to swim.
Yeah.
The reason being when it's vague, I always look at it from a perspective of my first task in vagueness is trying to define the problem.
Okay.
And it's interesting, actually. I spoke in my history. I had an interview with a VP at one time, looking at more of like really a distinguished engineering kind of role. And what was interesting in that conversation, I was like, can you help me identify what's your pain points? What is it that you're trying to change? Where are you trying to go? And ironically, there was no answer. And what's even more interesting, that person laughed and told me, I know this is vague, and I know I'm supposed to have an answer. So that's the kind of situation you want to address. So when you hear that, normally the first thing that should pop to mind is that I don't know if we agree or if we have aligned on the problem. And until then, there's nothing to change.
Okay, so let's talk about, because we promised in this episode a little bit of solution maybe.
Yeah.
So let's talk about alignment.
Right.
I think it's what I'm more interested in is how you get there, right?
Me too.
To alignment. And so you were describing to me a kind of concept that you had about how you help teams come to alignment. So tell me more about that.
Yeah. So the way to think about alignment is that we want to come back to a single monarchy. I'm going to keep using that analogy because we kind of framed it already, and it's helping to explain certain facts or certain, I'm going to call it at this point, certain philosophies. So we're presenting ideas and philosophies. So the philosophy here, when you think about this particular situation, if you will, I need to change. But first, this change can be coming in from multiple angles. It could be coming in from our system is just too fragile. We're getting beat by competition. We can't keep up. We could barely deploy our environment without spending like 6 months trying to, in retrospective, fix the issues.
Right.
So we could actually operate. We've reached our threshold. We can't take on more users, but the business wants to grow. Right. There's so many different things that could be there. I think at one time I mentioned to you about Meta. Like Meta is a great example. Let's think about Meta.
Right.
Meta, with Mark Zuckerberg talking about how Meta's shifting, they want to figure out how to bring AI to a personal aspect. Well, that's a big change, but it's a very clear change. It's a clear vision. So when you think about it from perspective of what's the type of change that we're looking for. So this change can be dramatic, like in Meta. It's going to impact their entire product line, right? The entire business, their user base. Or it could be as simple as we just need to be able to add more users. And we want to be able to handle large volume. So the problem that we're talking about, the scale of it is what's going to be interesting. Is it a very large scale, like Meta's scale, or is it a smaller scale?
Yeah. We just want login to work.
We just want login to work. So by understanding the problem first, now we narrowed our focus.
Right.
Or even widened our focus, depending on the scale of the problem. At this point, what are we trying to do? We want to bring everybody together that's impacted or that has an impact on the process. And it'd be surprising, like a simple exercise like event storming, bringing everybody together. What's the process? Where's the pain points? What can we change? What is fragmented versus what needs to be together cohesively?
That could be a very powerful meeting, right? Event.
That's right. It is a powerful meeting when you think about it. It's very interesting to sit on some of these event storming meetings, by the way. So the first thing you start to learn is that sometimes the quietest person in the room has the most knowledge. Surprising.
Yeah.
Sometimes you realize, going back to the silos and teams not communicating, so Conway's law, you start to realize that there's duplication of effort, but nobody knows until they've come together in a single room and talked about the process.
You're doing that? Well, I'm doing that too. Huh.
Right. And then magically everybody starts to get a aha moment when they were like, so that's why you keep asking for that report every month, right? So by knowing these things, I argue that these are your pain points. Where's your cost? What's the complexity of the system? That's it. Let's start there, especially when it's vague.
Right.
Let's start there. If it's clear, it's a whole different conversation, right? Everybody knows what's going on, but what we want to do is come together and together plan a system.
And so that exercise of bringing everyone together, talking about, what are our business goals? So this isn't, I think a lot of people would associate event storming with new development, possibly. And we're not necessarily in that case here, right?
It's not necessarily new development. It could be like understanding of the process.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Possibly even breaking down the monarchies.
Yes.
Right? And so we've got everybody. The exercise is we're going to bring everybody into the room. We're going to talk about this, align on business goals. Everybody needs to agree this is our North Star. This is where we're headed right now. And when we can do that, then we can start unpacking all of the baggage and everything that it's going to take to get there.
One of the things I always say, until the point where you put together what we call blueprint, until the point where you get to that point where you say, I know the problem. I know where we're going. I know the pain points. I know where we need to impact change. Now you have enough information and data to really start to stop and say, let's talk about our tech stack. Let's talk about our infrastructure. Let's talk about our development stack. So this is why we call it like when you think about it from a delivery mindset, delivery is not about your development stack. It's not about your just infrastructure stack. You're building something. You're building a solution to a business problem. The parts of the solution is everything coming together.
Right.
Right.
I love that analogy. And when you had initially kind of introduced that to me, my mind obviously went immediately to architectural blueprints, building a house, right? But man, the metaphors just started rolling after that, right? Because I understand, building houses and home improvement and everything. I understand it pretty well. And when you're going to do that, you're going to start with, a plot of land, right? And the land is probably not ready for building a house on it yet.
Right.
So you got to go through all that, getting the land ready for it. Then an architect is going to draw up your vision, right, of what you want the house to be. Along the lines, they're going to choose technologies. They're going to choose ways of building the house, right, to make sure that it's structurally sound, it meets code, and it's what you want out of it, right? And then once the architect has created something, then they're going to bring in, specialized folks for concrete, for framing, carpenters, all those kinds of things. And that's kind of the way that I was seeing when I reflect back on software development. It's a similar thing, right? You bring everyone into the room, you talk about the North Star, you talk about where you're headed, you get that vision together, then you go put together, well, this is how we're going to make it, right? And we're going to need, these different teams, or we're going to break this up into these different domains. But this is how we're going to think about it, right? And while when you build a house, you are really thinking about an end goal, right? That house will be changed at some point, right? It will be upgraded. Maybe somebody else moves in, adds a deck on the back of it. Maybe you just decide you want a bigger garage on there, something like that, right? The house is constructed not like modular where they're expecting things to be on there, but it is built in a way that upgrades are known. So when I look back on, managing the change and thinking about the change, and, when you break down those monarchies and you're trying to build that single monarchy with everyone aligned, this is what you're going to end up doing, right? We would call this modernization, right? Because you're going to have a bunch of existing systems or a bunch of existing microservices, right? You're going to have to go in and either modernize them, refactor them, but it's all of that, putting that together with here's the North Star. How do we make the old stuff look new or act new? How do we make the new stuff do good things? And how do we set ourselves up for a good future?
I like that analogy. You just covered a whole ton of stuff there. So to break it down, there's a few things maybe we could probably focus on. The first part, you talk about the land. I'm coming in fresh, new, going to start a new construction, got a land. So we could kind of say that's infrastructure kind of work, right? So that infrastructure is going to make sure we got electricity, we got water, we got plumbing, we got some kind of sewer system going on, right? And then we're going to put the slab. But that slab can't just be placed, randomly. We have to know how many stories are we talking about. Is it a single story, 2 stories, or is it a high rise? Completely changes the conversation around what kind of slab do you want. So going in, you have, I guess, you could kind of say the privilege to figure all that out up front.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Okay,
Right?
I'll go with that.
Because you have, and it comes with its caveats, but you have the privilege because you're not dealing with legacy. You're not dealing with issues that exist, but it comes with its own complexities.
Right.
The reason I think of things, when I use the word modern, I always preface modern with what's modern today. If I go back in time 100 years, I'm going to say, well, that was modern. That's the best that they knew at the time, right?
Right.
Things have matured. I come in to build that building with the same blueprint. Maybe that's not so great. I'm going to be hit with a lot of, I guess, code violations, if you will.
Yeah.
Right, at minimum. So this is the kind of reality that we live in, and software is no different. The only difference is one is physical. Once you build it, demolition is challenging. You got to figure out how to clean all that up.
Right.
Where software is tangible, but it's also intangible.
Yeah.
Right. I could easily get rid of it.
Not a physical thing.
It's not a physical thing, right? So that's a part of the analogies. The reason why I say the new development is tricky because we said modern. Now you need to understand the modern landscape, if you will.
Right.
Am I going to use Kafka? Am I going to use AWS versus Google Cloud versus Azure Cloud? So the decision, I'm going to say the pool of things available to us and the things we need to decide are quite vast.
And so that when you're putting together, that blueprint, you're keeping it at a more kind of people level, right? If I understand correctly.
Not necessarily people level yet. So I always put people strategically after a certain point. Because when I talk about people, I'm talking about now structuring teams that are aligned to a blueprint. So for example, do you bring in your general contractor before you have a blueprint?
No.
No. Do you bring in your roofer before you have a frame?
No.
Exactly. But those teams are experts in their area. Like I won't bring a roofer to do a framing. Like I won't bring an electric.
That will end very poorly.
Right?
Yeah.
Or bring an electrician to do a plumbing work. So that's why I put that towards the right moment in time. So sometimes you could kind of say like, postpone the important decision until it's important.
Right.
Right. So if you start with people, now what we're doing is we're kind of saying, hey, we have hammers. Where's the nail? I don't know what hammer do I need.
Right.
Right. If I'm doing a high rise versus I'm doing a single story or 2-story, or if I'm building in New York versus building in Texas, it's going to change.
Right.
So I don't know what that team is going to look like, the skill set that I need.
And so when you're putting together the blueprint, you're really trying to understand all of this, right? You're trying to understand the complexities. What am I facing here? How am I going to get this done? Where do you all want to be?
The blueprint should be where we're bringing in the business, the users, subject matter experts. We're bringing them together and say, hey, you guys collectively, with security and technology, collectively, you guys know what the problem space is. The goal is not to have the entire thing built out. This is where you want to build it out gradually. But how much information do you need to know now? That's the important part.
Right.
So if you balance agile thinking with the concepts of bringing everything together, this is why you bring everybody to the room, because you want to be agile. If you don't want to be agile, waterfallish, take your time, interview them one at a time, take weeks, months. But if you want to be agile, you want to move fast, you want to bring everybody together. Going back to lean practices. So Lean Sigma says remove the waste. The waste is handoff. The waste is playing telephone. Those are waste.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So now when you stop to think about it, you say, well, okay, how do I be agile, collect so much information, and be on the right track? I think it's going to require a team. This is how you bring your monarch back together.
We put it all together.
Yep.
So I'm gonna share a little bit of an anecdote because I love these. There is a certain Builder Brothers YouTube channel that I watch religiously, and they, I guess about a year or so ago, they took on one of their largest projects, building a house, 100% from scratch, building a house. They, as I gather in all their previous videos, they've built a lot of houses. They were raised by a father who was a contractor that built houses. Anyway, what I realized, you just showed me this, was after they had the house framed, they had it roughed in, no roof, no like finished walls or anything. I remember one of the episodes was, we're going to spend a couple of days with the HVAC, person. Right. Just kind of, he was a bit of a designer, I guess, on the business. And they went through the whole house because it's a humongous house, and talked about where all the ducts are going to go, where the registers are going to be, where the everything's going to be there, where the main units, how many units are you going to have, power requirements for all that. And then an episode after that, they did that with an electrician. And then they did it with a roofer.
Interesting.
Right? And they went through all of this is what you're going to need, right? They were doing it, one, because they needed a quote, from them to know how much it's going to cost. But two, they were doing it because they wanted to see what they needed to do to reinforce the structure to get ready for that.
Correct.
Right? And so like the ducting, they found a few places where they needed to sneak some ducting around a wall or something, and there was no provisions for it, right? Or they were going to have to build a soffit somewhere because there was a duct running through there.
Right.
They found all this, or as much as they could, made provisions for it as much as they could. And then a little bit time later, the HVAC actually came in and started doing their job. Well, of course, they found some other things that just weren't thought of. But at the time, that was the information they had. They did the best they could for the information they had. They created something. It changed, right? And they managed the change. They had to move things around and, whatever. They continue on with that.
And the change at that point in time is cheaper than at the point where you did the plumbing or at the point that you did the electricity.
Yeah.
Because the moment you put those ducts, the moment you start putting things in place, ripping those out is hard. Like I've seen them
That's going to be expensive.
Very expensive. And not only that, there's hidden risks that's involved. So for example, when you come in and you start to pull the electrical wiring, you're drilling holes inside of those studs. You can only drill so many holes in those studs before you become fragile. And then it won't support the weight.
Yeah.
So this is smart on their part because they're realizing that the change later in the wrong order is going to cause stability problems.
Right.
So think about it from a software perspective. Can't handle users. Can't go past 1,000 requests a second, for example. Can't push 25,000 requests a second from a reactive system, for example.
Right.
Right. Those are the kind of issues that you're going to experience. So those are side effects.
All right. These are all the good things about Blueprint and all that. But we promise some reality. So let's talk about some things that, spending the time to build a blueprint, spending the time to just meet with the teams, trying to align everyone. What are you not going to fix? What are you not going to be able to fix here?
We always say is like, think about it from this perspective. If they're not on board or they're resistant to change, there's this other part of that, I'm going to say, changing your sale, since you mentioned sale before. It's like, how do you shift your sale? Well, it's not just a matter of saying, oh, I'm just going to raise up the, my sales. That's not it. You have to figure out where the wind is coming from. You got to figure out, what's the waves look like. You got to go with the waves. There's I don't know the entire details. There's things that come along with it.
What I'm hearing is, you may not be able to change the monarchies, but at least you can identify them and know how to work with them or around them.
With them or around them, or bring in expertise to think through the problem and really address it.
Right.
And this becomes really a company-wide initiative. Sometimes it could be just maybe a line of business initiative. It depends on how big or wide the problem is, right? But yeah, we definitely can't fix that dysfunctional part.
Yeah. I mean, the cultural side of it, which I would say usually will play into the political side of it as well, right?
Right.
The general maybe dysfunction, which will usually stem from lack of direction more than anything, is the dysfunction. These kinds of things are, when it comes down to it, are people problems.
Right.
Right? And there is no amount of technology that's going to change or help people problems necessarily.
That's very true. Another part that I think is really important to think about that you can't fix if you got the wrong problem.
That's a good one.
Right. So we focus a lot on your first step is not people and your first step is not technology. It's actually the problem that you're trying to solve. If you don't know what the problem is, am I moving 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction?
Right.
I call that
It's
technical
easy to do.
Oh, it's so easy to do. Oh, I like this thing. I'm just going to go after it. Meanwhile, we haven't done the research. There's no business value, or I can't articulate the business value. Sometimes it could be $1 million later. It could be more.
I can think of 2 letters that everybody's chasing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I would bet you anything that most are chasing the wrong thing.
Right.
Trying to do AI.
That's right. That's right. Is the impact of AI understood enough for your domain, for your business, right? We understand, for example, larger organizations, especially in the software industry, their focus. They're looking at the technology of it. But the technology of it is not making everybody a technology company. That's their line of business, right? AI can't be, I'm going to turn my company to an AI technology company. Am I solving those software company problems, or am I solving a business like a banking problem? Whole different conversation when it comes to AI, right?
Right. Yeah, just changing it around and saying, we're going to become an AI company. It's like, well, I'd like to see the business plan for that, because
Right.
I don't know what an AI company is.
Yeah, like how would you, like, what does that even mean, right? So this is what I call that as a vague ask. We want AI. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well, here's the key takeaway from this. The modern delivery stack and the blueprint methodology, they give you a structured starting point and proven tools to address platform chaos, but they're not a magic bullet. There are plenty of things that they just can't solve. You still have to solve the human organizational problems that we've been talking about, regardless of what kinds of technologies you might have.
That's exactly right. We're not saying we're magically going to reduce or eliminate software complexity. Software development is complex. What we are saying is we want to have a methodology and set of tools and approaches to reduce the unknowns, to reduce the variables. That would help us to at least identify at the right stages and make it apparent at the right stages what we need.
Which brings us to our final episode in this series, When Good Engineers Build Bad Systems. We'll explore why talented teams with good intentions end up creating operational nightmares, and most importantly, how engineering leadership can prevent it from happening in the first place. Because ultimately, the teams and the methodologies are only as good as the organizational context they're applied in. Thanks for listening to Go Into Production. If you haven't, please consider subscribing to our podcast. I'm David Diroff, and we'll see you next time.